Cognitive Strategies for Reading and Writing by the Pathway Project. Here are all the cognitive strategies that are covered in this video and where they can be located. Being a skilled writer or reader isn't just something that you're born with, it's something that you learn. There are all sorts of skills and strategies that can help you improve your reading and writing abilities and be successful in school. So, what is a cognitive strategy? Well, the word cognitive comes from the word cognition, which means the process of knowing or thinking, and a strategy is a tool or a tactic for solving a problem. So, cognitive strategies are thinking tools. As you learn these cognitive strategies, they become part of your own personal toolkit for reading and writing. When you first sit down to read or write something, it's important to have a plan. Planning and goal setting is a cognitive strategy you can use to help you accomplish what you set out to do. So, if you had an assignment to read the novel Esperanza-Rising and then write an essay on one of the characters' motivations, your plan might be something like, my main purpose is to read and understand the entire book by Friday and then have my report written by Sunday night. And my top priority is to select a character to focus on and to take careful notes on the character's actions. Or, I will accomplish this goal by reading one chapter each night this week, having a draft of my essay done by Sunday to bring to school Monday for peer review. As another example of a cognitive strategy, skilled readers and writers often start off by tapping their own prior knowledge about a topic. This means taking what they already know about the world and connecting it to the text. So they might read the title of a text, look at a picture on the cover, or maybe read a summary of a text, and then try to make connections between this content and what they already know about the world. To give you an idea of what tapping prior knowledge might look like with Esperanza-Rising, you might look at the title and say to yourself, I already know that Esperanza means hope, or feeling like you want something to happen. So the title is Hope Rising? Esperanza is also a girl's name in Spanish. That's interesting. And this picture reminds me of a farm that I visited once. Then you might read a summary of the book that explains how, after a tragedy, Esperanza and her mother are forced to leave their home in Mexico to work on a farm in the United States, and say, this relates to other books that I've read about immigrants and refugees. Based on the associations that come to mind, readers and writers often make predictions about what will happen next in a text. For example, looking at the title page of Esperanza-Rising, you might predict that the book is going to be about a girl named Esperanza. You might say to yourself, I'll bet that this book is probably going to be about her rising up out of something, but I'm not sure what. I think it might be out of poverty. And if her name is Spanish, then I think she probably comes from a family that speaks Spanish. Believe it or not, when you read something, you're composing your own version of what you're reading in your mind, just like you compose drafts when you write. A good strategy for doing this when you first start reading a text is to identify the characters, the setting, and the main events or the conflict, and to sum it up in your own words. Sometimes it helps to find a friend and tell them your summary of the story so far. So, for Esperanza-Rising, you might say, the basic gist of this story is that a young girl who is very rich back home in Mexico has to move to the United States during the Great Depression, and then learn how to work on a farm. Or you might say that, in a nutshell, the conflict is that Esperanza has to learn to adjust to the hard work of being on a farm in California when she grew up as the pampered daughter of a rich and powerful family in Mexico. Asking questions about the text is another way to understand the gist of the story. For example, you might ask questions like, I wonder why the book is called Esperanza-Rising when some might consider Esperanza as having fallen from her high social position. Or, what if Esperanza's father were still alive? What would her life have been like? Or, how come her mother decided to move them to the US instead of some other country? Experienced readers and writers also make connections when they read. They draw from their own personal experiences to make meaning. Different types of connections might be connections that you make between the text and yourself, connections between the text and other texts that you've read, or connections between the text and the world around you. When making connections, you might say things like, "Oh, this reminds me of that television show that I watched last week, and that book that we read in class about Ellis Island and immigration," or "I experienced this once when my mom lost her job and we had to really cut back on expenses for a while," or "I can relate to this because of the time we moved when I was in 3rd grade. I hated it, and I was really lonely for a while." The visualizing cognitive strategy is kind of like making a movie inside your head as you're reading or writing. While visualizing, you might say things like, "I can picture how angry Esperanza was when she smashes things because she doesn't want to leave home." Or, "In my mind, I see Esperanza standing mournfully at the train station tugging at her awful yellow dress, waiting to be taken away from her home." Or, "If this were a movie, I would show the thick fog blanketing the citrus groves and the leftover fruit hanging on the trees like Christmas decorations." Another important cognitive strategy is adopting an alignment. To align means to give support or to come together with something. So adopting an alignment happens when you read or write and get so interested in a text that you feel like you have entered the text world and are there. This is easier to experience with a longer text like a novel than a short story, but it has to do with identifying with characters or topics. When adopting an alignment, you might think about which characters you feel most aligned with and why, or which characters do you feel the most distant from and why. You might say things like, "The character I most identify with is Esperanza because I also had to move from my home and leave everyone I loved behind." Or, "I really got into the story when Esperanza's uncle showed up and things got exciting." Or, "I can relate to this author because she writes stories about kids my own age." Experienced readers and writers also go back and rethink, change, or revise their opinions when things don't go as they thought they would in the text. When revising meaning, they might say things like, "At first I thought Esperanza-Rising meant that she was going to rise up to be rich again, but it turns out that she learns to rise up in other ways." Or, "My latest thought about this is that it was actually a good thing for Esperanza and her mother to leave Mexico, even if their life is hard at the farm in California." Or, "I'm getting a different picture here because at first I thought Miguel was a really good guy, but now he seems like he's run away with all of Esperanza's family's money." So you revise your earlier predictions about the text as you read and learn more about the characters and the plot. The monitor is a little voice that talks to you inside your head when you read or write. It's kind of like a police officer or a little cheerleader inside your head that can tell you to stop when you're confused and things don't make sense, or it can cheer you on when you figure something out and you have a big insight. When monitoring, you might say things like, "I got lost here because I didn't understand what that word meant, but instead of looking it up, I just kept reading." Or, "I need to reread the part where Esperanza realizes Miguel is gone because I don't really understand what happened." Or, "I know I'm on the right track because my interpretation of the meaning of the title, Esperanza-Rising, seems like it might be turning out to be right." Another cognitive strategy that experienced readers and writers use is clarifying, or trying to get a better sense of what is going on in the text. When clarifying, you might say, "Something that is still not clear is why the servants decided to go to California with Esperanza's family." Or, "To understand better, I need to know more about the class system in Mexico." Or, "I'm guessing that the word palanca means some sort of support, but I need to keep reading to find out." Another cognitive strategy that you might use while reading and writing is called analyzing an author's craft. This means to think about not just what the author is writing, but about how the author is writing it. When analyzing an author's craft, you might say things like, "A golden line for me is do not be afraid to start over," or "This word, phrase, stands out for me because it seems like the theme of the novel," or "I like how the author uses descriptive details to really show how Esperanza is feeling." As we read and write, we are constantly forming interpretations, moving from what the text says to what the text means to us. As we're reading, our perceptions or impressions of people, places, and events can change, and this is often based on our own ideas about particular topics. When forming interpretations, you might say things like, "What Esperanza-Rising means to me is that everyone must find a way to rise above difficult circumstances," or "I think the blanket represents Abuelita's love for Esperanza," or "The idea I'm getting is that Esperanza really doesn't need all of the material things like dolls and fancy dresses to be happy." Thinking about the deeper meaning in a text allows us to reflect on the author's message and relate it to our own lives or to society at large. The cognitive strategy of reflecting and relating involves thinking about what sort of message are you taking away as you finish a text. When reflecting and relating, a reader might say, "So, the big idea is to never give up. Even if things seem to be going in a bad direction, life can always turn around." Or, "A conclusion I'm drawing is that overcoming adversity can build character." Or, "This is relevant to my life because we all have hardships that we need to rise above, just like Esperanza." Another important cognitive strategy is evaluating or giving your opinion on what's happening in the text. When evaluating, you might say things similar to, "I really like this book because it was about immigration and focused on the experiences of a teenager." Or, "My opinion is that this book was worthy of the award it received because of its emotional impact." And, "The most important message is to never give up because things can always get better if you keep a positive attitude." Phew! That's a lot of cognitive strategies. But remember, just like you wouldn't use every tool in your toolbox at one time to fix something at home, most readers and writers don't use all of the reading and writing cognitive strategies all of the time either. Some strategies will work better with certain kinds of text, and some strategies work better at certain points in your reading or writing than others. What's important is knowing what these strategies are and when and how to use them to construct meaning when you're reading and writing. Now that you're familiar with some of the cognitive strategies in your toolkit, you can start thinking about how you might use them in your own reading and writing.